All right, as they're finishing up, I will begin today's lesson. So we have been in a sermon series, for those of you that have been with us this summer, where we've been looking primarily at the texts in 1st and 2nd Peter, and we've been looking at sort of the pieces of what Christian culture looks like, especially culture in our local church. And though we've loved being able to move through 1st and 2nd Peter and how they've pointed us to several just really important issues in culture, there was one that wasn't in there that I kind of debated, like, do I need to teach on it still? And I at some point became convinced that I do. So we're not in 2nd Peter today. For those of you that have been reading ahead, my apologies. Today, we're going to spend some time with words I think you know, but I don't really know if you know them. And we just did it, right? So every week we collect tithes and offerings, and we call them tithes and offerings, not charitable donation or just giving. We call them those two words because those two words are tied to like dozens of chapters of content in the scriptures. We use the phrase tithes and offerings because those are the two primary giving methods throughout the entire Old Testament. And I assume you know what those words mean. But I've learned through the years, it's not always fair to assume that you know what words mean. And so today, we're going to have a lesson on what tithes are and what offerings are, because I want you to understand how we think about giving, how we think about money, because it's a part of how life works. And in my experience, it's also one of the sources of stress in life. And the good news speaks to it. And so I want to go there, and I just kind of recognize that, you know, we don't explain the context every time. We kind of assume people know what's going on. And if that's been unfair, I'm sorry. I'm going to take care of it today. But I want you to start with some foundational assumptions, okay? As we go to the text, and we've got, I had 40 different places to look at the word tithe and discovered that there's 8 whole chapters devoted to it. I'm going to summarize a little bit today. As I'm doing that, you may want to write down the texts and go read it yourself, because if this is foreign, you're going to want to read it yourself. You're going to want to sit with the Lord. You're going to want to wrestle with the meaning of these scriptures. So I kind of give you a heads up. I'm going to cover a lot of scripture, but I am going to have to summarize a lot of it because there are chapters of content for tithe and more chapters of content for offerings. And at some point, we're still trying to make sure that moms and dads' kids don't die of hunger. Okay? So I've tried to abbreviate on some of these things. All right. As you're listening, I have a request. Would you start from the foundational position that God is the source of all resource? Because there's no real good way to understand the scripture's teaching on economics if you don't start at that point. That God's the source. He created you. He gave you life. He created all that is. He gives us this abundance, this beautiful creation. He gives us the power to make wealth. That's in Deuteronomy 8, verses 12 to 18. Go with me there. Deuteronomy 8, verses 12 to 18. When you have eaten your fill and have built fine houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks have multiplied, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have that is multiplied, then do not exalt yourself, forgetting the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrible wilderness, an arid wasteland with poisonous snakes and scorpions. He made water to flow from flint rock. He fed you in the wilderness with manna that your ancestors did not know. He did this to humble you and to test you, and in the end, to do you good. So do not say to yourself, my power and the might of my own hand have gained me this wealth. But remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth. And he does this so that he may confirm his covenant that he swore to your ancestors that he is doing today. In this modern day, it's very reasonable that somebody might ask, like, why would we talk about money, or who is God that he would tell me how to spend my money, or why would I listen to scriptures from thousands of years ago about, like, why would I do that? Because God's the one who gave you life, and God's the one who gives you the power to get wealth. There's a relationship there. And the expectation as I teach through these scriptures today is this. There is an invitation to a healthy relationship with God around the issue of money. And I don't know if you know this or not, but lots of people's relationship with money is heavily influenced by fear, the fear of lack, and lots of people's understanding of money is highly influenced by envy because they wish they had what other people had and they're mad they have them, and there's a grumpiness in our culture around money. How many of y'all have bumped into the grumpiness in our culture around money? Right? The reality is this is actually a difficult issue for us, and bringing it back to God's design invites us to freedom. It invites us to a greater grace. And so with that in mind, I'm going to heavily teach today from the Old Testament law, not so that you feel the condemnation of being out of touch with the law of God, but so that you're invited to trust the one who would design such things. Today is a day about your relationship with God around the issue of economics. And so please, as much as you can, don't get stuck on one detail. Get invited to know the God who created this system. Because he invites us to freedom. He invites us out of our fear, out of our selfishness, out of our lusts for more things, out of our envy of other people. He invites us out of all of that and into a healthy prosperity that isn't self-serving. And I, for one, would like more of that. So with that attitude, come with me. All right, two things. I'm going to give a really quick definition of tithe and a really quick definition of offering because we're going to use it the rest of the day. I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So tithe, literally a tenth. 1/10.1 for you decimal loving people. It is if I've earned this and I divide it into 10 even pieces, that 1/10 is my tithe. And so everywhere we're doing this, we're dealing with math. How many of y'all love math? Yay, glad we got a few. Okay. Offerings are used differently. Offerings are gifts given with a specific purpose or from a specific motivation, and they're not part of the tithe. They're extra. So the tithe is a tenth. It's taken from your harvest, and an offering is a voluntary, I want to do a thing. And it can be as big or as small as you want to make it because it's just free will. And so that one gets to be fun. All right. We first bump into this idea in Genesis. Abraham, Father Abraham had many sons. He also had over 300 people in his household who could wield a sword. He is not a small-time rancher. And there's a war that happens in Genesis 14, and Abraham, with his 300 household soldiers, defeats 5 kings. If that doesn't sound miraculous, you're new to the Bible. Like, he defeats 5 kings and their armies. It's ridiculous. It's kind of wild. You wonder what's going on. But after he defeats them, he gets the spoils of war. And he takes a bunch of stuff because that's how war works. The winner takes all. And as he's going back home, he comes past the town of Salem. Now, you know it as Jerusalem, just to put it on your map for those of you that have your understandings of Israeli geography. As he comes past Salem, there's a priest there whose name's Melchizedek who blesses him. And Abraham takes 1/10 of all of that spoil that he just got and gives it to Melchizedek the priest. And this is our first glimpse of the tithe. It's long before law. It's very much a free will thing. But Abraham gave 1/10 of all the spoils to the priest Melchizedek as a thank you to God for helping him defeat 5 kingdoms. That's our first glimpse. As we look through Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, that's where most of the references to tithes and offerings that we're going to explore today are. Our first lesson is that the tithe is holy. Our first lesson is that the tithe is holy. So Leviticus 27, verse 30, a tithe of everything from the land, whether grain from the soil or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord. It is holy to the Lord. Jumping forward a couple of verses. Every tithe of the herd and flock, every 10th animal that passes under the shepherd's rod, will be holy to the Lord. No one may pick out the good from the bad or make any substitution. Right? So you're bringing your flock home and they're going into the pen. Maybe you're going to shear the sheep. Maybe you're going to check them for health. Maybe you're going to trim their hooves. But as you're bringing them in, it's like 1 animal, 2 animal, 3 animal, 4 animal, 5 animal, 6 animal, 7, 8, 9, 10. This one doesn't belong to me. This one's holy. Okay, 1 animal, 2 animal, 3 animals, 4, okay, 10, right? This one doesn't belong to me. This one's holy. That is the simple math of the tithe. It's 1/10. It's the grain from your soil. It's the fruit from the trees. It's the animals in your livestock. Now, Israel at this point is primarily an agrarian culture, right? So all of the illustrations are tied to agriculture. So we've got grain from the soil, we've got fruit from the trees, we've got livestock, but there's not a lot of discussion of like stocks and bonds and securities, right? Because it's an agrarian culture. There's no mentions of, is this your W-2 or does this, what if I get a 1099? Like none of that discussion is here because that's our weirdness, right? And this is a simpler time. But at some point, your harvest is whatever comes to you from the fruit of your labor. So it probably is your W-2 if you get one of those. It's probably the bigger number, not the after taxes number. It might be your 1099, but if you run a business and your business owns your car, so it's not taxable, like you may have to do some math to figure out which of this is honestly my harvest? And your harvest may have nothing to do with how you do your taxes. Though I do assume you're doing your taxes as a holy person and correctly, right? But you may have benefits from running a business that are in fact part of the harvest of your home that you may need to consider part of that as holy to the Lord. And that's harder for you with business people. For you people getting a W-2, it's easy. For you students who are like, I'm a full-time student, it may be that this is good education for later when you have that high-paying job. Remember us when you come into your glory. Offerings are not tithes. They're extra. So like in Exodus 35, when they're ready to build the tabernacle, Moses is like, okay, guys, we're going to build the tabernacle. Here's all the instructions. We're going to need some fibers. We're going to need some leathers. We're going to need some gold. We're going to need some bronze. We're going to need some wood. It's like, and people just start bringing offerings. They're not calculating it in relationship to their harvest. They're just giving it to the Lord. And as it goes, everyone who is willing, they bring to the Lord gold, silver, bronze, stuff. And at some point, Moses is like, okay, that's enough. Stop bringing me stuff. We have too much. I cannot wait for the day that I have to tell y'all, would y'all start giving to some other ministries? We have too much money. We can't manage it all. I can't wait for the day. It's going to be really fun. Leviticus chapters 1 to 5 are all about offerings. They're instructions to the priests about how to do them. And so if you've committed a sin and you feel guilty before the Lord, you might bring a sin offering. It's voluntary. It's in your response to your relationship to God. You're like, I did a thing. I feel guilty about it. So here's my sheep, right? And there's a process where you confess your sins and the sheep dies and part of it gets burned. There's a whole process there, but it's built around the understanding that sometimes you're going to want to do something tangible, physical, in your spiritual walk. So maybe you wake up and you're like, man, I'm so thankful for everything. Man, my life's good. God is so, you know what? Here's a thank offering. And you just show up and you give an offering to the Lord out of the abundance of thanksgiving. And it doesn't count towards your tithe. You're not keeping score. This is about you responding in faith to God, who has loved you and blessed you and given you the power to make wealth, and you're responding to him honestly. And there's a bunch of them. It could be that it's time, you're walking out to pick your first apple of the fall. And you're like, this is so exciting. I've planted these trees and I've cared for them and I've pruned them. And look at all those apples. And you pick that first apple and you go, this one's God's. And you give an offering of first fruits. And it's just a beautiful way to live a life of gratitude. And later, once you've added up all your all your apples, sorry, I'm wrong agrarian metaphor. Once you've added up all your apples, you'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? And you'll give a tithe as you're supposed to. But the first fruit offering was just out of the abundance of your heart. And you're not like subtracting one from your tithe because you already gave. You're like, no, just be fun with it. What, are you afraid you're going to run out? Y'all, the fear of lack hinders us on this game a lot. Go to war with the fear of lack, because the promise of God is that he will provide abundance. Okay. In the system that God designs, he sends them into a promised land. Okay? Now, this is where it gets a little weird for us, right? Because we just live in Ithaca, not the promised land. Really pretty this time of year, right? But not the same. So he sends them in, and every household's got a chunk of land, and there's a promise and an expectation built around the fact that God is giving us this land, and he's going to bless it with the early rains and the later rains, and he's going to give the harvest. And then we've got a responsibility of our harvest in how we tithe. But there's an understanding that God is actually the basis of the entire economic structure, and we live in Ithaca. I'm not sure that's how Ithaca thinks about life. Right? I don't live on the land that was inherited because God gave it to me with all my cousins and relatives, right? So there's a place where it's a little different, and we've got to figure out how do I live in faith in this beautiful gratitude that God invites us to? How do I do that here faithfully? How do I do that well? One of the things that we get to engage as we think about that is how they did the tithe. Now, I learned something this week. I learned there's two. I didn't know there was two. I've been walking with Jesus for 30 years. I've been tithing most of that. Lots of people have taught me about the tithe. I had no idea there was two. Scripture's fun. I had somebody who was like, how do I make sense of this verse? And so I went and I was like, how do our Jewish cousins interpret this? They interpret that there's two. I was like, that's interesting. How do Christian commentaries interpret this? They interpret that as 2 or 3. I'm like, whoa. I'm working on my faith for 1. So welcome to the ride. Scripture's fun. All right. I'm going to try to show you these 2 tithes. Number 1 is for the priests and Levites. And number 2 is for one of 2 things. Either it's for the biggest party the community has ever thrown every year, or it's for the poor, the widows, the orphans, the sojourners. All right, so let's look at these. I'm in Numbers 18. This entire chapter is about this. You're going to want to go read it. In verses 8 to 19, there are instructions about the offerings that are to the Lord. They're holy, and a portion of every offering goes to the priests. So when I show up, I'm thankful. I brought a thank offering. I got my goat, and I walk out. I'm just thankful for all that God's done. I've brought this offering to the Lord. The priests then sacrifice the animal, dash some blood against the altar. But now you have freshly butchered goat meat. Who gets the freshly butchered goat meat? The priests do. You've brought it to the Lord. It is then provided to the priests. And so they didn't need a separate butcher shop. They didn't have to go to the grocery store. As people brought offerings, a portion of each offering went to the priest. In verses 21 to 24, you see that a tithe of everything that's produced by all of the peoples goes to the Levites. So every priest is a Levite, but not every Levite's a priest. Right? So Levite is a tribe, 1/12 of Israel. And within it, there's a subset of people who serve in priestly duties, but all of them don't get a chunk of land. This plays out in Numbers 18, verses 20, but also 23 to 24. Take a look. The Lord said to Aaron, "You will have no inheritance in their land." Right, so 11 of the 12 tribes get a chunk of land for every family. Levites and priests, nope. But if I don't have land in an agrarian society, how am I going to feed my family? It is the Levites who are to do the work at the tent of meeting and bear the responsibility for any offenses they commit against it. This is a lasting ordinance for the generations to come. They will receive no inheritance among the Israelites. Instead, I give to the Levites as their inheritance the tithes that the Israelites present as an offering to the Lord. That is why I said to them, they have no inheritance. So the Levites, the priests, they're promised the tithe, that one that's holy to the Lord, that a tenth of everything is holy. It goes to the people whose job is to help the people of God be holy. So the holy food goes to the holy workers who work to make the entire community holy, and that tenth is sacred. It is holy to the Lord. It only belongs to them. But wait, there's more. Jumping over to Deuteronomy 14. Starting at, I'll start at verse 22. Set apart a tithe of all the yield of your seed that is brought in yearly from the field. And then in the presence of the Lord your God, in the place that he will choose as a dwelling for his name, for those of you that read ahead, that becomes Jerusalem later, you shall eat the tithe of your grain. You shall drink the tithe of your wine. You shall use a tithe of your oil. You shall eat the firstlings of your herd and flock, so that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. All right, imagine, if you will, 11 out of 12 tribes. They've given a tenth of everything they have to the Levites and the priests. Then they take an additional tenth. I don't know how much money you make. Slide the decimal point. A tenth of your household income. Now, everybody take a tenth of your annual income, go to Jerusalem, and throw one party. I've never been to a party like that. I've been to parties that probably did cost a tenth of somebody's income, right? But like one person was hosting the party and it was one person's tenth. Most of those were weddings, right? But what if everybody brings a tenth? I don't know what that looks like. Like, I read that and I go, do they even sell expensive enough food to do that? Like, I don't even know. I'm just a simple guy, right? Like, I don't know. If you live close by, you're supposed to physically take your harvest. If you live further away, verse 24. But if, when the Lord God has blessed you, the distance is so great that you're unable to transport it, because the place your God will choose to set his name is too far away for you, then you may turn it into money. So you sell it locally. And then with the money secure in hand, go to the place that the Lord God will choose and spend the money for whatever you wish. Oxen, sheep, wine, strong drink, whatever you desire. Now, I don't know how many of y'all have had sermons previously in whatever churches you've been a part of, but your second tithe is in part to buy whiskey. Or if it were me, tequila, and some orange liqueur to make margaritas. Y'all with me here? Yeah. How wealthy is this nation? Your harvest is big enough that you can give 10% to the Levites, you can blow 10% of on a party, and you're still provided for. I want to know what that's like. I don't currently experience that. That's, wait a minute, what? Yes, you are supposed to have the most riotously fun party ever in the history of mankind every year with the abundance. And y'all, we're sitting over here afraid. And God wants to set some people free of that fear of lack today. There's one other way the tithe gets used, and this one's interesting. So the first tithe goes to the Levites. It's holy. It only has one designation. The second tithe, we're doing different things different years. Okay, so Israel had a 7-year system, right? Years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, normal years. We're planting, we're harvesting. Year 7 is the Sabbath year, literally the root of our sabbatical, right? In the 7th year, you don't plant, you don't harvest. If stuff happens anyway, you can eat it, but you're not working. And so the land gets rest, you get rest, really fun year. The promise is that year 6's harvest will be so big, you're good. Right? Your barns will be overflowing. You will survive through year 7 without worry. Y'all with me? All right. So, but then years are all numbered. And so this next verse in Deuteronomy 14, I'm at verse 28. Every third year, so that's year 1, 2, 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and then we reset after 7, and we're back to a 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So every third year, I've lost it. Where'd it go? Here it is. Bring out the full tithe of your produce for that year and store it within your towns. That year, you don't throw a big party. Year 1, you throw a party. Year 2, you throw a party. Year 3, you take your tithe and you store it locally, and it's available to somebody in need. So you got a widow in town, she's set. You got an orphan in town, they're set. You got somebody traveling through, and they're a sojourner, and they don't have a place to live, and they don't have land to harvest from. They're good. They are allowed to take from the storehouse. A 10th locally stored every third year. So that's year 6 as well as year 3. And year 6 is the year you get a double harvest because year 7 you don't harvest. So is anybody in town hungry? No. What about people that don't have land? We're good. We've taken care of them as well. And it's beautiful. Amazingly, there's more. You happen to be poor, you happen to be vulnerable, but wait, there's more. So there's a storehouse, and every 3 years we fill it up, right? So we're good. But like, what else could you do? There's an expectation that you don't actually harvest all your capacity. Look with me to Leviticus 19. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap to the very edges of your field, or gather the gleanings of your harvest. So after you've collected it, some of the grains fall. You don't go back and find those grains. You just leave them. You shall not strip your vineyard bare, or gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the alien. I am the Lord your God. This is a really fun way to help the poor, because you're telling everybody, listen, don't harvest your entire field, leave some there. But it's kind of a free will offering. I decide, do I trust God with this much of the edges or that much of the edges? Or am I really scared? Like how much of the edges do I trust God with? And then the poor get the dignity of being able to work instead of just receiving a handout. Now, a handout's better than starving, but working for it applies some additional dignity to their life. And so it's a beautiful way to care for the poor while letting them work towards it. All right. I have photos for you. Angela helped me make some pictures. All right, so you visual learners, I've been talking a lot. Let me show it to you. All right, can you jump to the pictures? All right, so this is your field. Okay? You've removed the rocks from the soil and you've made walls with the rocks, and so you've got this field. That's your whole field. You're going to harvest inside of that some amount, and we're going to call that 100%. Now, it's not really 100%. You've left some behind, but for the rest of the math, we're going to call your harvest portion 100%. You've left some edges. You have some margin in your life. Hallelujah. But so does the culture have margin in its life. So that's your 100%. Off of that, your first 10% automatically goes to the Levites, to the priests. It's holy to the Lord, and 10%, you never really consider it yours. As you're counting, you just set aside every 10th one. All of that is holy to the Lord. After that, you measure an additional 10%, and it's either party year or storehouse year, but either way, you're going to watch it go. Now, after that, right, I'm reading in Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. After that, they get kings. And what do kings do? They tax you. The taxes come out of the 80% of your remaining harvest. And some kings tax more than other kings. All right, so what are we down to? We're down to 70%, though we've left some behind, so maybe we're at 65. Like, I don't know how big the margin is, really, right? Maybe we're at 65. That's yours. Now, what percentage of Americans live paycheck to paycheck and have no margin, let alone no tithe? What I have just taught you, which I'm just trying to pull from the scriptures, is so ridiculously foreign to Americans. We spend everything on ourselves. And I don't say that to be condemning. It's just honest. We, as a culture, we spend everything on ourselves, and then we borrow so that we can spend more on ourselves. And that is not healthy. It's not healthy, folks. Do we look like a people who are free of fear and thriving in faith, paycheck to paycheck to paycheck? And part of the challenge we have is because everybody else is living so extravagantly, everything costs a lot. And I bring us back and go, so where's the promise of God? Engage our life today. Because his model is one of abundance and rejoicing and freedom. It's one of faith and promises fulfilled. It's one where the poor are well taken care of, multiple ways that they can be provided for. It's one in which God is really honored in our labor and in our work, but we're free to gain wealth. Because the expectation and the promise is that that box of 65 is going to be bigger than you need. So you're going to be able to put away for your future, and you're going to be able to have seed to plant next year. You're not going to have to eat it all. There will be bread for eating and seed for sowing in that box. The invitation of God is that if you'll trust him with your wealth, he'll build it. And he'll expand it. And as you care for the poor, he'll bless you, right? Because he knows it's not going to be self-serving. And so he'll increasingly bless you, and you'll increasingly be a blessing to others. He can trust you with wealth. And the more I read the scriptures, the more convinced I am that he wants to trust me with wealth. But he invites me to play along. All right, so I read so many commentaries this week. I have lived my last 30 years walking with Jesus knowing that there is one tithe. And I want you to know that there's wild agreement through the centuries that one of the tithe was holy and it only went to the Levites, and the other tithe went to other purposes, and I've not been doing two tithes. and Heather and I are going to have a budget meeting. And I don't actually know how to get there right now. Like, I actually don't. My guess is we won't jump to it immediately, right? And some of you, as you're listening to this, you're like, live on 65%. I'm barely living on, I mean, it's like, how? So I want to be practical. As we look at, okay, so here's this teaching on biblical economics, and here's this teachings on tithes and offerings. What do I do with it? So here's where I would start. Start with gratitude. God is your generous provider. He is the God who gives you the potential to make wealth. It's a gift. He loves you. Start in thanksgiving. Let your giving be done with praise. Second, know that a portion of your harvest has always been holy, and begin to treat it as holy. If you've not been treating it as holy, begin to treat it as holy. Because that first tenth has always been holy, which means it's not for you, it's for the Lord. If you didn't know that vulnerable people are our responsibility, right? Widows, orphans, sojourners, like that's the standard list. Sojourners sometimes gets translated aliens, for those of you that love modern politics. Those are our people. We have been blessed, and they are part of our responsibility. In the same way that caring for your own household is part of your responsibility, those vulnerable people also are. And if you've not thought of them that way, begin to invite God to retrain your thinking. Those are our people. We get to take care of them. You're going to start with gratitude, and you're going to practice gratitude. You've got to get in the habit of practicing it, which means you should give gifts over your obligations. If the tithe feels like a law, because it is, and it feels like an obligation, because it is, then giving offerings becomes a way to practice gratitude. You start with gratitude, and then you keep going with gratitude. So give somebody a gift. Just give somebody a gift. And the more stressed you are with money, I'm not kidding, sometimes that's actually the right time to give a thank offering. I remember a day a couple years ago, Heather and I don't know if you know this, but we went through, I preached on managing chaos, and our life became chaos for 3 months, and the irony was not lost on me. But our family budget, we had the tree fall in our house, and the car break down, and the washing machine broke, and like, we were $3,000 over budget 4 months in a row. And I was done. I was just at the end of my rope. And when the water heater broke, the same day the cat went to the vet, I just broke. I was like, I can't do this anymore. God, I'm at the end. I just can't do this. And I went out and collected eggs from my chickens, and I drove over and gave a dozen eggs to somebody. And it stopped. I don't know what God did, but I know that the last bad thing that happened that year stopped when I gave an offering. And I didn't give the offering to stop it. I gave the offering so that I didn't stop being a man of faith. And God honored it. And I invite you into that world where if you'll trust him and if you'll give him your generosity, that he'll bless you. For a whole lot of us, all right, just go ahead and just take a breath. I'm going to drop one on you, okay? You need to spend less than you harvest. A lot less. And for some of you, like, you're going to have to move house to pull that off. Okay. Okay. For some of you, you're going to have to wildly change your lifestyle to pull it off. Okay. Yeah, that may be what God's asking for you, and consider it and play along because he's good. He's good. But we live in a culture that does not do this well. And we as people of faith have got to draw our lines further back. We've got to leave more of the margin. We've got to be a people who said, it's not actually about me as much as it was. And so you need to look at your life and you need to make some choices and you need to say no. And I don't know which things those are, but as I look at us as a culture, we are radically getting that one wrong. And if it's you, let today be the day you change directions. Lastly, trust God for your well-being. Don't trust in your ability to harvest. That's risky because you aren't God. He's the one that gives the early rains and the late rains. He's the one that sends the sun to warm the earth. He's the one that allows the plant to grow and to fully grow and then to blossom and then to show the seed. And he's the one that gives the growth. Make sure you think that way. Because if you think, now I have to give more and I'm still the one who's responsible for all this, you're going to give yourself spiritual hemorrhoids. You're going to hurt yourself. Because this requires God to be part of the equation. But he is. All right. A couple of practical things. Practical things. I'm going to give you 3 practical things. If you've not thought about this before, if you're looking at this and you're going, I'm outside of that, what do you do today? Today's a day where you decide, okay, God, I'm going to change. I'm going to play along. That's all you have to do today. You don't have to know how you're going to do it. You don't have to figure out which things you're going to do yet. Today you get to go, I'm going to play along with God. And for many of us, that'd be enough for today. And then just walk that out. Let God lead you. Let him show you how to do it. If you need free of the lack of fear, ask him for that. If you need free of selfishness, ask him for that. But decide. Second, I absolutely did not preach this for anybody in the room to feel condemned that they're outside of the law of God. I came to show you this gift that God offers us. And so trust God's mercy while you're figuring it out. This is an invitation to faith. This is an invitation to trust. This is an invitation to walk with him. It is not to beat you down. All right, last. Do something. Right? Don't just be hearers of the word, be doers of the word. What do? Make progress. And I don't know where you are. Like, you may be like, I give $10 in the bucket each week. Like, that's where I'm at. Okay? So, hypothetical, let's say you earn $60K a year. That's your W2 take home smaller, but your total amount's $60K. And if you're giving $10 a week, that's $500 a year. You're giving 0.8% of your income. That's a long way from a tithe. So what do? Figure out how to double it. As an act of faith, figure out, I've been giving 10, now I'm going to give 20. I got to find $500 in the budget. And do it and let it be an adventure. Let it be fun. Because then you're at 1 2/3%. Like, that's real progress. Right? Like, that's real progress. And then you go, okay, that's kind of fun. And maybe it took you a year. Okay. But you've been on an adventure with God and you've been trusting him and you've been making decisions and you've been transforming your behavior to get in line with God. That's a really productive discipleship year. Okay, well, you're earning $60K. Now you're given $1,000. Okay, you get a raise. Okay, hang on. Don't do what Americans do and promptly plan all the ways you're going to spend the raise. Don't do that. Okay, I got a 5% raise. I'm going to spend the same as I was giving $1,000. I'm going to slide that full 5% raise over, right? And now I've made progress. Y'all with me? But you have to discipline yourself to not spend it first. Which, to be fair, this is a good life lesson. This doesn't have to be an onerous command of God. It's an invitation. Come trust me with your finances. And as you do, I'll open the windows of heaven and pour out blessing. Let's pray.